Welcome. My name is Gena Timberman, and you are listening to Timber People, a podcast about people who, like timber, are strong, build and create, who gather us together like fuel that feeds fire. People who support structures of our community that uplift and protect. Welcome to Timber People. I'm so happy and honored today to be with my dear friend, Jerod Tate. Welcome, Jerod.
Chokma, it's good to see you.
Chokmashki for being here. And this is fun.
Yes.
Here we are on some good relaxing time visiting together. And Jerod is a composer, a member of the Chickasaw Nation. It's not every day that you have a global cultural ambassador of the U.S. Department of State, among many other honors, to be with us. And I want to say that this podcast is really focusing on connecting people in our community and building bridges. And I want to talk about that with you and your work. And I love the fact that here we are in Oklahoma City, and in our community, you could be living next door to a global cultural ambassador. So this is so much fun to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's so good to be here. It's really funny because the whole world is like that. And if you really think about it, the people that have had the most global impact didn't come from major cities. It's like people come from out from under rocks. When you really think about it, it's like, so many people are from small towns and just unexpected areas. And so you could be neighbors with anybody and not even realize it. And this is kind of how the world works. And it's really kind of cool.
I think about that, especially in terms of Oklahoma. So many of our creativity ambassadors have come from Oklahoma, the world creative ambassadors. And so it's really exciting to have you on the show. And, when I started thinking about what we would talk about today, it's, talking about the past, like where you started, what you're doing now, which is so incredible, and what you have on the horizon. Perhaps we start a little bit about you and how you got started with the awesome work that you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that, Gena. Well, first of all, I'd like to go ahead and introduce myself in the language.
Yes, please.
Chokma, Chokma Tak, Sahos Jafoet, Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate. Impichchaachaaha Choka Michashawi Iksa, Ishtalon Chololili, Taloa Ikbili. Hi, everyone. My name is Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, and I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation here in Oklahoma, and I'm a professional classical composer. So my journey into music came from both sides of my family, my mother and my father, and I'll tell you a little bit about them. My father, Charles, is Chickasaw from Ardmore, Oklahoma, and Dad, professionally, he graduated OU Law, and he became a tribal judge and a special district judge, and was counsel to the Chickasaw Nation, and also was a judge for Cheyenne Arapaho Nations and Kickapoo, and Dad also cut his teeth in the 70s. With the Pueblo water rights in the 70s, and he was working with all 19 Pueblos in New Mexico when he was really, really young. So he just has a really, really great deep history in tribal law and politics from around the country. And so I grew up saturated with that language from my dad. And I'm so grateful because my awareness of Indian country was really quite unusual for a kid my age. And so I have that awareness that I take into my life today as a musician. But Dad was also a phenomenally trained classical pianist and baritone. And in fact, it's really cool. My dad was an accordion player, and so he would actually sing restaurant gigs. He would sing arias playing an accordion and singing in Italian. So you got this Chickasaw kid who would do that isn't it
So
funny?
cool.
It's like only in America. It's like you find something like that. But it's also a really great testimony to Indian country because we are so creative and diverse, and the stories that we have of our tribal people are really mind-blowing. Just all the little details of how people grew up and what they were exposed to, and kind of how we've utilized that. And it's been going on for quite some time.
Right.
But I love telling a story about my dad. And my grandmother was the first stenographer in southern Oklahoma, and she's Chickasaw. So she was a court stenographer. And so if anybody knows what that is, it's the people who are typing in shorthand, for court documents. Right. And so that's just really cool that there's so many Indians who are doing all those really unusual gigs when they were younger. So anyway, so that's Dad. And so, but I started piano with my father, and it was when I was 9 years old is when I started, and within about 3 months, I had announced to my parents that I was to be a concert pianist. I was completely in, and so I just really, really loved playing. And so, mom is my mother Patricia is originally from Lincoln, Nebraska, and mom is Manx Irish. So I am Manx and Chickasaw. And mom and dad met in Enid. They both went to what was called Phillips University back then. And they both met in the theater. They were both heavily involved in theater. And so I grew up saturated in theater from both sides of my family. Mom was a professional choreographer and dancer and also a university faculty for 30 years. And so I just grew up just completely immersed in theater. And in fact, a lot of my early artistic heroes were the early American choreographers. So, like names like Isadora Duncan or Martha Graham, Ruth St. Denis, and Ted Shawn with their company, and so, Agnes DeMille, and then of course later on there were choreographers like Jerome Robbins and Bob Fosse and Alvin Ailey who I knew as well, and so these had a great impact on how I saw art and also American freelance art, because these were American pioneers in art. And so I really, really enjoyed that. So that on top of all of our American Indian visual art that was also exploding around the same time as these American dancers, all of this has greatly informed how I see myself as an artist. It's really incredible. We take this for granted now, but our visual art in Indian country is a good 150 years old now. And it's an own entire solid genre that is world famous.
Absolutely.
The people fly in from all over the world to go to Santa Fe Indian Market to buy native art specifically. And that's been going on for some time now.
Right.
I mean, we have a few generations under our belt of this. And of course now, oh my gosh, the explosions that are happening now in film and fashion.
Absolutely.
It's just it's stunning what we continue to do. And then on top of that, of course, we've got all kinds of natives in theater and that are authors as well. Of course, Joy Harjo is a really good example.
Right.
She's a third-time poet laureate for the United States of America, and she's just one of many people. And so. But now in the classical arts, there's an explosion of native classical musicians, and it's really, really wonderful. Lots of composers, performers. It's really, I love seeing this time. And I didn't know this when I was 15, that I would be on the journey that I'm on to begin with. And now that I'm in my 50s, I'm seeing this huge wave of new talent in Indian country in the classical performing arts. It's just really, really incredible. So lots of pianists, instrumentalists, composers, and it's really, really wonderful. And I feel so blessed, and I feel like life has started yet again. Like about 5 years ago, it was like, it's all started again. It's really cool.
Right.
Yeah.
That Renaissance in Indian country, as you mentioned, has started many, many, many years ago, and it continues today. It's that continuum that swings back to our past and where we are today and into our future. Now we're creating places and new venues and experiences to showcase that and to gather and to really speak and present from the first person, from the Native community perspective. And
yes,
I'm just so excited about everything that you're doing and playing the producing role of that too. And so that history of being a part of that is so present with you and your work today. I love it.
I really appreciate that. As I'm aware of that, and I love it. My ego loves it, and I also feel very grateful that I can do this. And what happens is over time, I just keep looking back at both of my parents, and I'm just stunned at what I was given, the building blocks that I was given by both of them, even if they were unaware of it.
Right.
It's really incredible to see when you're standing on top of a mountain and you're seeing this beautiful landscape, you realize that you're standing on the shoulders of generations of people who've done work so that you can be doing that. It's really, it's becoming more and more clear over time, like whose shoulders I'm standing on, and just like how many years. It's just really amazing to me, and so I relish in that every single day. And so I have a son, Hiloha, who is 9 years old, and I think about that all the time as I'm raising him. It's like, what am I giving him? And he may not be entirely aware of it right now, but hopefully over time he will be. But I am. So
Right.
I'm thoughtfully going, okay, what can I do to best serve my son and give him the same tools that I was given by my ancestors?
Absolutely. You
Hmm.
know, our families, to get where we all are today as Native people,
Hmm.
we've had to have a level of support from our immediate family,
Hmm.
extended family,
Yes.
communities, in many respects, our tribes. And our ancestors, the tribal leaders of the past, had to make difficult decisions
Hmm.
to keep us together. And so that, history, I say, is like that guitar string that reverberates with us
Yes.
today
Yes.
in very challenging ways, but in very positive ways.
Hmm.
And the fact that we're here to support one another from a familial perspective is
Hmm.
important. And your family nurturing your talents and
Hmm.
interests,
Hmm.
because that can't be easy in terms of the equipment that you need, the lessons.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the traveling and the
Hmm.
commitment and
Hmm.
sacrifice that your family had for you to have that talent nurtured.
Yes, yes, I totally agree, and again, I become more and more aware of that, like all the nuance that went into the support that I was given from both of my parents is really really quite overwhelming, actually. And you think about the timeline. You're talking about our kind of our ancient support system. I tell people often that our ancestors, you and I, our ancestors, walked 800 miles in mud so that you and I could sit down and do a podcast about them.
Right. Right.
We are their success, and so our obligation is to be successful. I mean, if they could be sitting in the room right now, they'd be like, this, yes,
Hmm.
this is what we were hoping for, even though we
Hmm.
couldn't know exactly what they were going to be doing. We're doing what they hoped we were.
Right.
And so this is an honor to be able to talk about our success and to really brag about it. We need to do that. And again,
Right.
it's like, and so in art, the kids that are younger than us need to see us as adults feeling really, really good about of our accomplishments, so
Right.
then they can go, yeah, I need to feel good about that too. That means that all of that work that has been done has been worth it.
Absolutely. You've been given a gift, and
Hmm.
every human has been given a gift.
Hmm.
And what are you going to do with it?
Right.
And, what I would say in challenging times is, if not you, then who?
Right.
If who's going to tell our story more than,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that sometimes you'd have to own that. And
Yeah.
even though it's daunting
Hmm.
and can be really scary, if
Hmm.
not you, then who?
Yeah.
And so I say, Jerod Tate, if not you, then who? I look at your body of work. I look at all of the cool things that you have been involved in, from teaching children in camps
Hmm.
with tribes, and not just one tribe, your tribe, through
Hmm.
the Chickasaw Summer Arts Academy, but tribes around the country
Hmm.
in school programs, to working with scientists with the Oklahoma Medical Research
Yeah,
Foundation,
that
to
was
the
great.
Creativity World Forum, which was
Yeah.
a whole adventure.
Yes, it was. That's right.
And to producing what you're doing around the world now, which I want to get into,
Sure.
but also like your HBO series Westworld. I mean, you could tell me anything, and I'm like, you can't make any of this up. I'm like, you could tell me like you're on the space shuttle,
Yeah.
and there's an experiment that involves music, and
Yeah.
I would say it's you and John Harrington are on that space shuttle, and I have no doubt it's happening.
Well, I would not turn down the opportunity to be the first composer on Mars. That's for sure. And
Right.
I've talked to my son Hiloha about this. And I've told him, I'm like, I'm actually realizing that you could literally be going to Mars someday, and we don't even know it yet. I mean, it's entirely feasible. And he's like, "Well, Dad, would you go?" I said, "I'd go in a heartbeat." I said, "If you go, I'm going.
Right.
I don't care how old I am. I would absolutely join you. I wouldn't go by myself. I'd go with my son."
Oh, right.
But I mean, that would be really really great. I mean, and also like as all the whole Zoom thing was coming into line, a lot of musicians were embracing that as well. But we had lag times that were a problem, right? Well, Zoom fixed that, and so there's all this technology that's been catching up to all this. And so I tell people we're going to be live streaming from the moon, like concerts from the
Right.
moon, because right now there's only about a 1 second delay. That's going to be compensated for, that's for sure. And in due time, we're going to quantum stream from Mars. That's going to happen. We're going to be doing live streaming concerts back and forth to Mars.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned Zoom, and you and I have had some interesting conversations about how your work changed
Mhm.
during the pandemic.
Mhm.
And, as we all know, there were some really negative experiences
Mhm.
related to work that we
Mhm.
had to endure,
Mhm.
but it changed the way and made some opportunities in work really efficient.
Yes.
And I know that you were traveling all over the place,
Mhm.
all over the country and beyond
Mhm.
to work with entities. And you really were really innovative in the way that you shifted gears
Mm.
and began to work with partners,
Mhm.
clients, and others through opportunities to create. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
There are silver linings, and again, it's up to us to look for that. I mean, it's we owe it to ourselves to try to find whatever positivity is in any circumstance. And so when the whole pandemic hit, I did the whole thing. I bought a Rode microphone, got a Logitech camera, and set myself up with really good audio and sound. But also, what I did was for the performance world. I mean, that was tough on all performing. For both for the composers, the performers themselves, and the performing organizations. And I remember the 3 days that Oklahoma City shut down. It's like I became a homeschool parent very quickly,
Right.
and I was working from home, and of course all the concerts were canceled, and I was just set with what was sitting in my savings account. And I remember sitting there going, "Okay, look at your bank account, get that number in your head." And then I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And I thought, okay, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to try to solve one problem per day. And if I can solve one problem a day, then in 30 days I'm going to be okay, because I had like 3 months of money to live on. Is basically
Yeah.
what I had.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I have no idea how I'm going to revitalize income, but at least I can have a daily goal, just one day at a time,
Right.
And so that's what I did. And so then I was looking at my colleagues and my clients who had like pending invoices for my music. And they had concerts that were all this, and I just thought, I was doing that whole thing, starting to write an email like, I still need to collect this or that, and I just couldn't do it because I realized nobody had money.
Right.
Everything had just stopped.
Right.
And so everybody was looking for $5 bills. And I was just like, I can't do this. I can't just clamor for these pennies at the bottom of the fountain, And so what I did is I ended up writing everybody, and I said, by the way, pause the invoice. We have no idea what's happening. If you can and when you can program the piece, please do. And we'll talk about money when the time is right. But
Wow,
you've
yeah.
got the music. And so I did that. And then I thought, you know what? Let's just do this. And so I made a public announcement, and I sent emails out to every organization. I said, my music is free for the next 3 years.
That's incredible.
That's it. Just go. Because I knew that this pandemic was not going to go anywhere. Because, you go in, but then there's a reverse mudslide. And that's what we're doing right now, actually, is we're in the reverse. And it's just as difficult, if not more difficult in some ways. And so I just thought, I can see all this happening. And I just thought, well, the only way that I can help is if I give all my music for free. And then I can rely on my other part of my portfolio in which I receive royalties. And see, so you have to see yourself as a freelancer and how you lean into stocks, or you know what I mean? It's like I was thinking like any kind of a stock person was like, okay, well, these stocks are weak, so I'm going to put time in these and relax on these guys. And I was just thinking that in terms of all of my relationships. And so as we speak, I'm still in that. So through 2023, all my music is free to ensembles and performance organizations.
That is awesome. And thank you for that.
Sure.
And I've been a beneficiary of that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no.
And many organizations have. And that's where, that's a real gift. And this podcast is about building bridges. And I love the fact that you stand in your identity as a Chickasaw man and as a Native person, and can reach across this genre and connect, unsuspecting audiences with this the sound and the stories through music and connection to cultural identity that may not otherwise be out in broader audiences.
Right. Yes.
And the compositions that you've created, drawing from your Chickasaw heritage into being at the Metropolitan Museum of Art or into San Francisco,
Yeah.
Symphony Currents program or throughout the world is really awesome.
Well, thank you. I'm a very, very blessed man, and I am aware of all of that, and I'm really, really hoping that I'm honoring the efforts of Edmund Pickens, who brought us over and signed all the treaties, and was in charge of all the land allotments in Mississippi that we sold off to come here. If they could do that, I can do this.
Right.
It's like I get a cell phone. I can call anybody at any time. They didn't have stuff like that. And the weather affected them far more than it does me. So I just try to really kind of think about that and be like, okay, I'm empowered. So how can I go ahead and go a little further and make sure that this is happening, or how can I make this vision even bigger than It's just that there's so much that we've been given, and if we waste any of that time, and then it's just it's wasted time. But also there are Native kids looking at us. They're watching us. And I want them to find the same energy and to find that they have the same abilities to create new spaces. One thing that I really love about being in Indian country today is that we are now in places in which, you were just mentioning this earlier, we're hosting, we're providing.
Right.
We're creating opportunities for Indians and non-Indians.
Right.
And that is, oh my gosh, that is a total success and a dream come true. That we can do that. And I love being in that place that I can provide for anybody on the planet.
Absolutely.
And say it's coming from a Chickasaw person. That's pretty cool.
It's game changing.
It really, really is. And the more that we can do that, the better off we're going to be as people, and the more change we're going to be able to enact in the world.
I love that phrase that you said, I am empowered.
Yes.
And that's really something that I hope young people and really all of us should really embrace is I am empowered. And what are those resources? I mean, now more than ever, we've talked about, career opportunities, and just the other day was interviewing a friend about, workforce development and growing up. We did really, it's incredible. You knew you wanted to be, in your career now. I didn't think that way. And I would have never thought I would be in my career now. And so it's so awesome that the exposure for young people and for anyone to have resources available to connect through technology today and to explore new potential avenues of engagement and career and diverse experiences is just awesome. And what you've done, what you have accomplished in that regard is, I think we'll see the ripple effects for many, many years to come.
It's for better or worse.
Definitely for better. Definitely
I can always
for better.
apologize later.
Well, you have so much happening right now. What do you have on the horizon?
Well, I think one thing that we can talk about that I would really love to talk about is the opera Shell Shaker that's coming out. And it's taken a little bit of a schedule turn because I happen to have surgery in the fall, and it really kind of threw a curveball in my time schedule. And so the opera's been delayed for its premiere. But actually, the end result is even better than what I imagined. It's like silver linings.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. Okay, so this opera is entitled Shell Shaker, Luxi Shali, which is to carry shells. It's to carry turtle shells. And this is an opera based in one of our pillar stories that we have in our tribe. And this is the origin story of how we received our turtle rattles for our stomp dancing. And of course, there's different versions of this.
Right.
And so I created a version to be in an opera. And actually, there's another one of the other stories I did was Spider Brings Fire. That's another fire origin story that we all share here. I say when we all, it's because you and I are both from the Muskogean culture.
Yes.
And so anyway, so Shell Shaker is a story that I just found many years ago to just sit perfectly into an opera. Like I just saw a 2-act opera. It was, and actually when I was composing a work entitled Lowak Shopala, there was a segment called Shell Shaker. And as I was writing it, I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, this could be totally expanded. So that's what I've been able to do. And so I was commissioned by Tien Hui Ng, who's a conductor at Mount Holyoke University, which is part of UMass Amherst College System out close to Springfield, Massachusetts. And so he commissioned this work. I was actually applying for grants from Opera America to develop it, this kind of thing. And so he was on one of the review committees and caught wind of this. And they have Carnegie Mellon funds to commission operas. And he's like, I'm just commissioning this opera straight up. And so he did that, which is just amazing to me. And so anyway, so that was a really, really great fortune that happened. So this opera is sung entirely in the Chickasaw language. Lokosh, Josh Hinson, he is the director of our language program for the Chickasaw Nation. He is the translator and interpreter of the libretto.
That's awesome.
And I've worked with Josh for many, many years now. We've done many projects together. And so he and I are kind of like a team when it comes to librettos. And libretto is the words, it's the text for a choral work. And so so it's a Chickasaw story sung in the Chickasaw language, written by a Chickasaw composer. And so then on top of that, we have 3 opera singers who are absolutely phenomenal. And this is what I'm talking about. It's like, all these, like we have all these genres of fine art in Indian country. Well, we have opera singers in Indian country who are now saturating the market. It's really great. So we have a Cherokee singer named Kate Morton, and she is singing the lead, Loxie. Loxie is the lead girl. Her name is Turtle. And then we have Kirsten Kunkel, who is singing her grandmother, and Kirsten is Muskogee. And we have Mark Billy, who is Choctaw, singing both the river of the father, the roles of the father and the river in this particular premiere. So we have Muskogean people singing in a Muskogean language about a Muskogean subject that's like really, really important to our history. So it's just all this has come together. The serendipity of this is really quite amazing, and this was not possible 20 years ago.
No, that's stars aligning.
It is.
It's like an Indian star. That's a star chart right there. That is a star chart.
It's a creative
it's a
star
modern
chart.
day star chart.
I love it. That's fantastic. So so now what's happened is because I needed to delay the premiere. We're still performing it at Mount Holyoke, but also with the New England Philharmonic. We'll be doing excerpts for that. Well, now we're actually going to do the first premiere here in Oklahoma City with Canterbury Voices and the Oklahoma City Philharmonic. And that is honestly, it's perfect because it's being premiered at home. And so now all of our tribal members all of our Muskogean tribal members are going to be able to attend the premiere with Muskogean opera singers. I mean, it makes me want to cry when I talk about this because as I look back when I was 15 years old, no clue.
Right.
I had no idea that this was even going to be possible, and that I might actually have input.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, they say like you watch the water and the water has a path, but sometimes there are these boulders that fall and it forms a new path that's even more fruitful for the people. And this is like that kind of life way for bringing us together. And this is really what the podcast was really about. It's like the timber people, timber is like this fuel that warms and brings us together and can also build and, really support. And I love it. I love that you're creating projects that are still connected to where we are today and where we've always been.
Yeah. Well, I think on that note, another project that I'm really, really pleased about is it's kind of a culmination. I've been teaching Native kids around Indian country for the last 20 years. And so now finally I get to do it over at the First Americans Museum. We just had our first camp I like to call it camp. It's really an academy, but it's fun to call it camp.
Yeah.
And so, but we had our first one last summer. Now we're going to do 2 this summer. And so now I'm able to start expanding teaching to our Native kids here in the state of Oklahoma and kind of base it here. And I'm just really, really happy about that. But there's a whole legacy now of Native composition by Indian students, and we actually have 2 CDs that we have pressed that are on Amazon and iTunes and Spotify, and so that's creating that opportunity for our kids is really, really important to me. But also, I got to be honest with you. it's like the ideas, it's okay. It's really inspiring to me because as I'm teaching kids and they're writing stuff, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like a really good idea. I would have never thought to do that.
Right.
It's really, I mean, I'm benefiting, from these relationships that we have with our kids and seeing their creativity. It makes me go, I need to write that well.
Well, that's why we should all be talking to each other. That's that reciprocity.
Yeah.
And it's cultural. I mean, it's really that cyclical exchange of giving and sharing and your ideas. And we're really better together than one.
Yes.
I mean,
oh, yes. In spades.
right?
So, okay, I'm having a train of thought here. So you're talking about like the boulders in the river.
Right.
Let me tell you about a boulder that happened in my life earlier on. It's really, I have to give a shout out to an actor that a lot of us will know named Rodney Grant,
Right.
who's an Omaha actor from Nebraska. And so, okay, so the story is the way I started composing. See, I didn't even know I was going to compose until I was in my 20s. And so I was a piano major.
Right.
And well, my mother is a choreographer and a ballet teacher. And so she was setting all these major ballets. And so I grew up with all this ballet repertoire and all that symphonic music. That's like the best orchestral music ever written is for ballet.
Right.
So I was just okay, this is my life, whatever. It's, I'm just listening to all this great stuff. Who cares? So, and so my mom was going to do a new ballet, and she wanted to do a ballet based on American Indian stories from the Northern Plains and Rockies.
Wow.
And she taught at the University of Wyoming. So she wanted to do something that was relevant to Native people up there. So so she just looked at me. She's like, well, you're my Chickasaw pianist. You can write my ballet. And I said, you're out of your mind. I can't write a ballet. And so I told her no at first, but it really stuck. I mean, that was it. And in a really, really beautiful and innocent way, my mom was asking me to be all of who I am at the exact same time.
Wow.
A classically trained pianist writing music about Indian country. I mean, that's all of me right there. It's an American Indian man and a classically trained pianist. So there it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I started writing on my own in secret, for about a week, and I came to her with music, and so she really liked it, and so we did a ballet together, and that was my first ballet called Winter Moons, and actually that CD I just released that CD a couple months ago. So the reason I'm telling you that story is because the boulder that came in was Rodney Grant. Well, Mom included a storyteller in the ballet because storytelling is so critical to to Indian country. So she wanted that element. And so we just started to kind of shop around for Native actors, and Dances with Wolves had just come out the year before. And so I think it was on VHS already. And so we were watching on a VHS. So we're just kind of looking through the actors because we're just dreaming big. We're like, let's get somebody, who's like current and relevant. And so we're looking at the credits, and we made phone calls, like Graham Greene was one call that we made. And so, here's Rodney. Rodney was doing a gig out in Paris. And so we got a hold of him and we faxed him the script, and he accepted the gig. And so Rodney came in as the storyteller for Winter Moons, and he toured with us around Wyoming and South Dakota. So he came in. Of course, he was really famous. He was still winning his hair. His hair was still down to the floor and all this kind of stuff. And he was just rocking and rolling, and he was just high energy guy. It was incredible. And he just absolutely bowled me over. And he was very much on his kind of like his like Tom Robbins, empowering people and giving.
Tony Robbins.
I'm sorry, Tony Robbins. Yeah, that's
I mean, Tom may be very inspiring too.
That's right. But he was in that mode of inspiring, and he was giving a lot of talks to Native kids around Indian country as well. So that was part of what we did. Is when we were touring the ballet, he went and talked to Native kids in the area and gave all kinds of inspirational talks. Well, he was completely, just giving me the inspirational talk. He was like, Jerod, you've got to do this. He's like, you need to be our native symphonic composer. And I told him, I said, I can't do this. Oh boy, that was the wrong thing to say. I said, I don't know if I can. He's like, oh my God. So he just completely, just larger than life, just really hammered this into me. Like, you've got to do this. You've got to do this. You've got to do this. And I'll tell you, I owe him everything. Because it worked. Because he's like, and he also told me I'm responsible. That was another thing. He started kind of giving me the trip of you owe this. You're responsible. You are a leader now, and whether you like it or not. He was telling me all kinds of stuff that I wasn't ready to hear.
Responsibility is big.
Yes, it is. And so I was just like, So anyway, so the gig was over and everything, and I had time to ruminate about it. And so I went back to school and added composition to my degree. And that's when I had then announced, and I'd really thought it through, and I announced to my family that I was to be a Chickasaw classical composer.
Wow.
Yep. And that was because of Rodney Grant. Thanks, Rodney. And so, fortunately,
Shout out to Rodney.
I know. And fortunately, we're still friends. And
Wes Studi's probably like, why didn't you call me? No, I'm kidding. Shout out to our brother Wes.
Wes, you were just too expensive at the time. I'm really sorry. I'm just kidding. No, but actually now Wes is the voiceover on Spider Brings Fire on that recording.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have so many great friends in Indian country. And the thing is, you think about it, like that was 1990-ish, right? That this was all happening. We were all really just coming into our own,
right?
A lot of us were, and we didn't all know each other totally. And so now here, literally 30 years later, we are now 30 years later, a lot of us know each other. And it's really beautiful.
Really cool.
And we're able to support each other in ways that none of us really imagined 30 years ago.
Right.
So my experience currently as a middle-aged Chickasaw man with all of my Native colleagues is really quite positive.
It's so cool to think, Indian country is this continent, and Indian country is also very small. We're all connected.
I know. Yep. It's a small big town or a big small town. Yeah, Indian country is a really tiny town. And then sometimes it feels like we are so far away from each other, but we know way too much about each other. Right. Oh gosh. Oh, I just think about that. I just look back at the 90s and the 80s even. It's like, it's like at that time, there were Native entertainers who were like doing these, like they were like little shooting stars that were coming out at the time. And honestly, we were critical of each other. It's like, oh, what are they doing?
Right.
And it's like, and there was attitude that was going on because we weren't all sure about what each other was doing or even what we were doing. And so there was some uncertainty that was going on with it. I think it was really kind of natural that we were doing all that. But over a few decades, things have really coalesced.
Yeah.
They really, really have. And I'm feeling more than anything a lot of mutual support between Native entertainers. I really feel it.
Absolutely. And I think it's that technology that opens things up, podcasts, the internet, Facebook, social media in general, where we feel like we can connect with each other and be supportive. And, there are pros and cons to all of this, but it's, a few strokes of a keyboard away where you can, connect or reconnect. And I love that, you meet these awesome young people and they're up and coming and I may not know them, but I say, oh, I know your mom or your dad.
Right. That's right.
You see him from across the room. You're like, you look just like your mom did at that age.
That's really, really funny. Oh, my gosh. And it makes me think about my parents. It's like, what were they thinking at the time? And it's a beautiful cycle. It really, really is.
Well, speaking of children, I had the great pleasure, not the first year, to see your son in the Nutcracker.
Yes. Oh, that's a real pleasure. So my son's name is Hiloha, and Hiloha is the Chickasaw word for thunder and Choctaw word for thunder. And actually, his mom was pregnant. Emily was pregnant in the summer of 2013, and that was when we had like really, really bad tornadoes here in Tornado Alley. And so, unfortunately, there was a lot going on there. Well, and there's lots of thunderstorms. He was responding like Alien Baby. It was really, really nuts. And so she was like, "I'm going to call you Thunder." And I said, actually, our word for thunder is a really beautiful, name possibility. So we'd thought about that. And so the night he was born is when Piedmont had a really, really big thunderstorm, and we were up at Mercy, and so the storm was going on. So we're like, well, there it is.
Right.
So my son's name is Thunder, and I'll tell you, he's earned it. There's no doubt about it. He's earned his name. But Hiloha is he plays the French horn. He's been playing for 3 years, and he's also a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, as a composer, this is like quite a dream come true because, like for instance, the other day we were listening to a recording on the classical station that they're playing the Mozart horn concerto, and it was this really great recording. I forget the artist, but she was just crushing this piece. It sounded wonderful, and I was like, "Son, this is a really good horn concerto in the repertoire." Blah blah. And I said, "You're probably going to play this someday." He goes, "Yeah." He said, "So are you going to write me a horn concerto?" And I was like, oh my
Wow.
gosh. And I looked at him and I said, yes. And I thought, I can't believe I'm having this conversation with my son. I can actually write him a horn concerto. It
Right.
didn't even occur to me. And then I said to him, I said, I'll do you one other. I said, in fact, I said, if you stay in ballet, I could probably write you a ballet. And so you could be the lead. And I said, you could probably do both. And he was like, yeah. So we were just kind of having a good time, just kind of talking about it. But I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, that's possible.
That's rare to have that opportunity, that gift,
Yeah.
that
And
bond
I
to
think these
create.
opportunities are all over the place and they're in front of us if we open our eyes. It didn't even occur to me until he had brought this up. And now I've got this, I'm cautiously optimistic, right? I've got this little tiny dream in my heart that's like, okay, let's see if he stays with the horn, if he stays with ballet, is this possible? I mean, it's entirely possible.
Yeah, no dream is too tiny.
No, it isn't. And of course, one thing that's really cool is during Nutcracker season. So what I was able to go and audit the conducting, Maestro Levine let me go in and just study the score while they're all playing. So this is all my friends in the Philharmonic, and I get to sit here and just read Tchaikovsky's scores while it's being conducted and performing. It's a really great opportunity as a composer just to be able to do that while my son is dancing above me on stage.
My heart was beaming seeing him on stage. I love that you say alien baby because he is out of this world. So cheesy.
I'm very, very proud of him, and it's like when I think about my son in ballet, I think about the legacy that he has. I mean, we have our Navajo choreographer and dancer, Jock Soto, who's still working. And I actually did a project with him just a couple of years ago, and he lives in Santa Fe. So he's still, kicking and grooving with his projects. And of course, we have the legacy of the 5 Indian ballerinas from Oklahoma. And so Hiloha is part of a legacy that's already 75 years before him. This is really, really quite amazing. So it's new, and it's like, oh my gosh, this has been going on for quite some time.
Right.
So I'm inspired. I feel like I'm eclipsed by all of both the past and the future.
Absolutely.
It's really incredible. My own son, I feel eclipsed by his sunshine. I really, really do, along with Maria Tolchief.
Well, you're all a part of it. It's about that continuum.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, and I say, wow, we're really doing some progressive things here, but we've always been progressive people.
Yes.
Or we would not have our mound building culture. We would not have like Woodhenge. We would not have those very advanced ways of looking at stars from ancient times of, some of our tribal cultures.
Yes.
And so we've always been progressive people. We're just continuing these long-standing traditions.
I couldn't agree more. And we were just as intelligent and creative and brilliant then as we are now. And if we went back and talked to our own people back in the day, we'd be having the same conversations, especially if you're talking about parenting. It's like I joke with people. I say, it's like when we meet aliens, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, the common language is going to be math. No, the common language is going to be music or art. It's like, no, the common language is going to be parenting.
Right.
So I think about that because it's also like, so let's take ourselves back, like 2,000 years, right, to our ancestors, and think about what they were doing artistically. Well, they were, shell carving, okay? And of course, they had local artists that were making stuff for their friends and their families, and they were trading for it. They were making a living doing that kind of thing.
Right.
And somebody was coming up with like a new notch that went around the edge or some kind of a new whatever way to hang it around. Anything that they were doing, people were adjusting it and trying something new. They were borrowing ideas from somebody else in a different village that was nearby. They'd come back and be like, oh, this person's doing that. And the same conversation would happen. Some people would be like, ooh, that's great. That's the new way of doing our shell carving. And some other people will be like, well, that's not how our ancestors did it. That's not really traditional, is it? That the same conversations and debates were going on then in the art world as they are now. And I take a lot of comfort and joy and kind of humor in that because it's like, we can kind of laugh at ourselves and say, we've never changed. So we're just as funny, and kind of just as ridiculous, but we're also just as brilliant and beautiful and well.
Absolutely. We were always sharing and exchanging. And before we end the podcast, you mentioned about Hiloha's traditional name. And that's so much a part of, our language is so much a part of our identity of ancient times, of how, we are who we always were. Can you share with us a little bit about your traditional name?
Oh, yes. Impichchaachaaha is our traditional house name. And so we have house names and clan names. So Impichchaachaaha is my house name, and my clan name is Shawi, and Shawi is raccoon. And Impichchaachaaha means his high corn crib. And so a corn crib is a raised corn silo in which we would store our vegetables and keep it away from critters. And you grease the poles, and so they can't get up and everything. So it's kind of a functional name. So the best way I can describe it is, our clan names were a real important social system because you received your clan name. That was a matrilineal lineage that we received from our mothers, and you would never marry into your same clan. And that's something that's really common around the world, actually.
Right.
And so house names were much more like surnames, and so you could be part of a clan and also a house, which was like you were saying, von Beethoven, which means you're from the house of Beethoven.
Right.
So Impichchaachaaha means like you're from the house of high corn crib. So we had that system that had two systems. I don't entirely understand how it worked in ancient times, but we still have remnants of that now. And I'm very fortunate that my family still has our house and clan names. So Hiloha he's also Impichchaachaaha. He's also Shawi. And so that's where our traditional name comes from. And I just decided to really use that all the time about 20 years ago. I was I've just got to put it right up there. And boy, it's a long name and it's funky, but it's such a beautiful window of opportunity for discussion. Everybody loves trying to say the name, and we have this conversation that like you and I are having right now. We talk about the meaning. I love it as an icebreaker, a conversation maker. It's really, really beautiful because also I can deliver the conversation with an element of joy. So, hey, please ask me about my culture. Let me tell you, I love it, and I want you to enjoy learning about it. And now you know something that you wouldn't have known if we hadn't had this conversation.
Absolutely.
And hey, and I have those opportunities with other people. So if I meet somebody from the Ukraine or Lithuania or something, I'll be like, hey, tell me about how do your names work and how does your culture do this? I want to know the same things because if I need to know something about Cambodian culture, I don't know where to look except for talk to somebody from Cambodia and ask them all the dumb questions like, so how do you guys do this? And I have the same questions. And so I really love opening and facilitating cultural conversations with people.
It's so important. And that's a really great point, that cultural conversation, the language, the language as this portal through which we learn more about one another. And I think it's so important to always stay curious.
Yeah.
So I really thank you so much, my dear friend.
Yay.
Chukmashki, Yakoki.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on Timber People today. My good friend, a timber person. Yakoki, thank you for joining us. Timber People is brought to you by the Possibilities Podcast platform.